Okay, so it's another week and another big camera release. This time it's the turn of the Insta360 X6. Now, Insta360 is making some big claims about this camera in terms of how it can replace your action camera, your gimbal camera, and your 360 camera. So I'm going to cut through all the hype, tell you what it's good at, and more importantly, what it's not so good at. Can it really do all those jobs really well? Let's find out. As per always with my camera reviews, I have made footage available for you straight from the camera that you can download, and I've put that link in the description below. So if you want to experiment and practice grading the footage or critically analyze it for yourself, you can do that via that link. So 360 cameras have been improving year on year, and one of the drivers of that has been Insta360. It's one of the pioneers in this space, and it continues to innovate and develop new capabilities for these cameras. Now, the X6 is slightly different from the previous cameras. It's a lot less tall. One of my criticisms of previous Insta360 360 cameras has been that tall form factor. For me, because they're designed to be used as action cameras as well, 360 cameras give an absolutely amazing POV, one of the best POV perspectives you can get on any camera. And the tall form factor of the previous Insta360 360 cameras has meant that putting them on a helmet has been pretty unwieldy. In order to use the previous cameras on a helmet effectively, you needed a horizontal bracket so that the camera would have a much lower profile. But now that the X6 is slightly less tall, it's a bit more practical to use on a helmet. It's not quite there yet. It's nowhere near as low profile as GoPro's Max 2. And as far as I'm concerned, at the moment, the Max 2 is the best 360 camera for POV for that very reason. It's taller than the Osmo 360 as well, but I'm glad to see that Insta360 has taken note and is reducing the height. I just think it could probably widen out a bit and then reduce the height even more for more practical use on helmets in the future. But it's good to see that they're going in this direction finally. So along with a more compact size, the sensors have actually increased in size. They're now 1/1.1 inch sized affairs with a 2.44 micrometer pixel pitch. Now, Insta360 claims around 14.5 stops of dynamic range because of those larger sensors. They offer much higher performance than the previous generation. Now, these sensors apparently have been co-developed with Sony, so they are exclusive to Insta360 cameras. Now, that's first. I haven't heard of this happening with Insta360 in the past, and it's interesting that they have moved to Sony as a sensor provider for this. Now, an interesting design point about the X6 are the metal contacts on the base. Now, it is compatible with the previous Insta360 magnetic quick release mounts, but these contact points mean that the camera can be attached to powered selfie sticks, so you can get external power to the camera while still retaining the full weatherproofing. The LCD screen on the X6 is bright, and it is really easy to see in bright sunshine. It's also got haptic feedback now, so when you want to change modes or you want to start and stop recording, you sort of hard press on the screen and it will start recording, but also give you that haptic feedback from the press as well. So it's a bit like pressing an actual physical record button in that regard. You still have a physical record button on the side, by the way, so if you're underwater or whatever, you can still start and stop recording there. But the haptic feedback's a nice little touch to the camera. The big feature here on the X6 is the 10-bit recording, and specifically 10-bit iLog. Now, with recent camera releases, Insta360 has finally made the move to 10-bit color, and it's great to see it appearing on its 360 cameras. Guess we're just going to have to wait for the Ace Pro 3 to see it implemented there on a standard action camera. But iLog in 10-bit is a big selling point for the X6. It joins the GoPro Max 2 as being the only 360 camera on the market that can do this. The Osmo 360 doesn't really count because D-Log-M isn't really true log. So far, the Max 2 and the Insta360 X6 are the only 360 cameras on the market with that 10-bit true log recording. Now, although 10-bit log is implemented on the camera and it's great to see that, there are some restrictions and limitations which I will get into in just a bit. Another interesting feature is the gimbal mode, and this makes the X6 behave exactly like a gimbal camera, like the Lunar Ultra and the Pocket 4. You can track objects and people, and you can reframe your image to get your composition right, and the camera will track around just like a gimbal. And Insta360 has gone as far as making a little remote control that can attach to selfie sticks, and even its own dedicated selfie stick, where you can control that motion of the camera with a joystick just as you can with any other gimbal style camera. With those larger sensors, the low light performance of this camera has also been improved. And interestingly, and a very welcome inclusion, is the fact that you can use iLog recording in that low light mode as well. One of the things I really don't like about low light modes on most cameras, apart from the Mission 1 Pro, because you can use GP-Log 2 in its own low light mode, but most other cameras restrict you and they force you into a standard color profile, and things can look over processed. Things have improved drastically recently with the likes of the Lunar Ultra, but you still can't use the log profile with that camera. But now with the X6, you can use iLog in that low light mode. Other new features on the X6 include Dolby Vision. I believe it's one of the only 360 cameras that can currently do this. And you can also pair the camera with Insta360's own POV head tracker as well. And it's actually more integrated with the X6 than it is with the Lunar Ultra. You don't need an extra adapter plugged into the camera. So you can get full immersive POV shots using the head tracker combined with the X6. Lastly, there's an auto edit mode, and this takes the pain out of editing 360 footage for people who really don't like editing 360 footage. Interestingly, all the processing happens on the camera. So once you plug the camera into charge, as long as you have the mode enabled, it'll sit there and it'll sort through your footage and create an edit for you. It knows about composition, all that sort of thing. In my experience though, while it does do an okay job of picking shots, the actual editing itself still has that usual AI style jumping from shot to shot for no apparent reason. You're not going to get a story being told within that edit. But, you know, for people who really don't like editing 360 footage, it's going to be something that they use quite often, and you don't have to upload your footage to the cloud in order to use it, and that's quite welcome as well. Also, the lens replacement system has also been improved so that the lenses on this camera are even easier to replace than they are on the X5. So in terms of the image that is produced from the X6, in the iLog mode, I do really like it. It produces a really nice image. The problem is that iLog cannot be used in all modes. You can use it in the 360 mode and you can use it in the 360 low light mode, but you can't use it in any of the single lens modes. And that's a big problem for me, because if I'm out and about shooting with this camera, I'm going to be switching between the different modes. I don't always want to be editing 360 footage, and 8K 360 footage takes up a lot of storage space. So if I'm doing a walk and talk, if I'm doing talking to the camera, we're using a selfie pole, I might want to use the gimbal mode for the sake of simplicity, but I can't use iLog with that mode. And that's infuriating, because it means that for me, as someone who wants to grade their footage, I can't switch between the different modes. I'm forced into using the 360 modes all the time, when I could be saving time and storage space by occasionally going into one of the single lens modes. But you can only use iLog in the 360 mode. Now, I've spoken to Insta360 about this, and the response was a little bit discouraging, because they said they've got currently no plans to put iLog in these single lens modes. I think that's a big mistake. I don't really understand why not, because it's not a huge technical implementation that they need to do. The camera should handle it really easily. Just do it, Insta360. People like me who want to grade the footage will really thank you for it. It's a strange omission, but it's not the only strange thing about the X6. The other one is with regard to the frame rates. Now, if you want to make your footage look cinematic, you know, I don't like the word cinematic, but if you want to use that term and you want to make your footage look a bit more filmic, and you would normally use the 24p mode, you wouldn't use 30p. I can tell the difference between the motion characteristics of 24p and 30p. You know, not everyone can, but I can. And I certainly don't want to be using high frame rates. You know, if you're a fan of the 1990s soap opera look or the news gathering look, then by all means use high frame rates. But for me, if I want to make something look a bit more filmic, I will always use 24p. And please don't get me started on the whole 25p versus 24p just because I'm British. That's not a thing anymore, unless you're shooting for broadcast television. But the problem is that 24p isn't available in all modes. Again, like iLog, 24p is available in the 360 modes, but it's not available in the single lens modes. You can only go to a minimum of 25p in those modes. Why? I just don't know. And again, I've asked Insta360 about this, and the response was kind of akin to, why do you want 24p? Well, because I want things to look more filmic and cinematic when I do some of my filming. And it's implemented in the 360 modes, so I really cannot see any logical reason why it wouldn't also be implemented in the single lens mode as well, but it isn't. So come on, Insta360, please, with a firmware update, just put 24p in those other modes and just put iLog in those other modes as well. Like I say, people like me will really thank you for it, and it would go a long way to making X6 a far more useful and versatile camera for people who like doing grading on their footage and want to do a bit more with their edits. One of the reasons why I'm so adamant that I want iLog in those other modes, even if I'm just doing a basic Rec 709 transform on the footage rather than in-depth grading, is because the resultant image just looks so much more natural. The standard color profile on the X6 uses a thing called adaptive tone 2, which is tone mapping. It's HDR tone mapping, to be specific. And people who've used the X5 will be aware of adaptive tone. On the X5, it could be switched off so that the standard profile mode looked a bit more natural. On the X6, adaptive tone 2 cannot be turned off. So you do get this very HDR look to the image, and it's over sharpened, and you get halos on those high frequency, high contrast edges as a result. So it looks very digital, over sharp, over processed. I'm not a fan of it, I'm sorry. But again, I did ask if there were plans to enable you to turn adaptive tone 2 off, and currently there are no plans to allow this. But this is one reason why I really do want iLog available in those other single lens modes, because otherwise you are forced to have the standard color profile with all that HDR style tone mapping that goes with it. And like I say, I'm not a fan of that. You know, I might sound like I'm being really overcritical of the camera. It's not the camera, it's the decision making on the design side of things and the technical implementation. These are things that could easily be fixed and solved in a firmware. So I just hope that Insta360 will take this on board, and in a future firmware enable people to use that iLog in those other profiles, so that we're not forced into using the standard profile with its adaptive tone 2 processing. Even though it sounds like I've really gone off on a rant, if you use iLog on the X6 and you grade it, or you do a color science conversion using Cinematch, it can look really nice. So, you know, it's not that the X6 has bad image quality. It doesn't. The image quality of it is really good, but I just want to be able to have a bit more control over it and choice in the matter. Now, a plus point of the camera is that, you know, I have been using this as an action camera mounted on a helmet, and I did move the mount on the helmet a bit further back to make the centre of gravity a bit more central, and that did help things. The camera itself isn't massively heavy, and once it was on my helmet, it worked pretty well. It wasn't hugely noticeable. I was aware that it was there, obviously, but it went pretty well, although I still do feel it is still a bit too tall. I was conscious that if I went upside down in my kayak, it could easily hit a rock and be considerably damaged. And I wasn't so concerned about the lenses because I know I can replace those, but I was more worried about things like the LCD display and that sort of thing. But it was pretty usable. I do hope, though, as I mentioned earlier, that Insta360 will bring out a horizontal adapter bracket for it so that I can lower that profile even more. As I say, I really do like 360 cameras for POV. They are all still a bit more unwieldy and heavy than a standard action camera, but sometimes the results from them are worth that extra weight and inconvenience. But yeah, if we can just lower that profile a bit more with a horizontal bracket like I could with the X5, because the brackets for the X5 isn't compatible with the X6, that would be really great. One thing I do like about the X6 is the audio. So I've just tried to set up a shot using the Active Track system. Apologies for the wind, by the way. I forgot to bring the wireless mic with me, but it's a good test of the X6's internal mic regardless. I tried to do a walk-by shot, and for the most part, Active Track works pretty well. It works just like a gimbal would, without the fragility of a gimbal system. Insta360 has carried on its tradition of using an actual physical wind filter on its microphones, so even in high winds, the voice is intelligible. And, you know, Insta360 is getting really good at this. You know, you can hear the wind noise for sure, but I took it out in some really high winds, and even though you could hear that wind noise, my voice was still intelligible, and that's because of the work that Insta360 has been doing with regard to its microphone pickups and that wind filtering in physical form on the camera, not just digitally. And just as a little bit of an aside, it also has another hidden microphone that's designed specifically to pick up engine noise if you're riding a motorcycle. Now, a few things in general that I like about the Insta360 system is that when I import the 360 footage, particularly if it's a POV view, I can turn on a function called jitter restoration. And what that does is it gives the image a much more sort of natural motion. It's attached to my helmet, so it's following my head. So you get a much more natural head movement. It's not all artificially smoothed out. It introduces some life back to the shot. And I really appreciate that for the POV angles that I've been getting. So can the X6 truly replace your other cameras? Can this be your sole go-to action camera, vlogging camera, and 360 camera in one? Well, if you use it in the standard color profile mode and that doesn't bother you, then possibly it can. But if you're wanting to grade your images, then Insta360 must enable iLog in all the other modes and 24p in those other modes in order for it to do so. For out and out adventure and action use, I still feel the GoPro Max 2 is the one to beat if you're shooting in good light, just because its profile has been developed to suit helmet mounting and action adventure use in a more sort of specific and direct way. GoPro has an understanding of adventure sports that other manufacturers simply don't, because a lot of GoPro's employees are adventure sports enthusiasts. So they do have an understanding of how the cameras are used in those environments a bit more than other manufacturers. Hence the reason why the Max 2 is the shape that it is. It's designed so that you can use it on the body and on helmets a bit more conveniently and easily without it being as noticeable. But if you're doing a mixture of lifestyle, vlogging, and outdoor adventure, the X6 will handle it all. And it is good as long as you understand those limitations on some of the modes that you're using it in. You know, the battery life on it is way better than both the Max 2 and the X5. So, you know, getting an advantage there, and it's really fast to charge as well. So the X5 is a step up in image quality and capability from the previous generation. It just comes with a few caveats that frankly, I think could be sorted out with a firmware update. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the Insta360 X6. If you've liked this video, please do like it and consider subscribing to my channel. And I would be really interested to hear your thoughts on the Insta360 X6 in the comments below. And I'll see you all in the next video.